Should talk about some crazy stuff.
Okay.
3, 2, 1. We're live.
We are live, Noah Blanton.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good.
It's
How are
early.
you? It is early.
7:30.
Yeah. So we got these tubs of coffee.
Yes. So, president, market leader of WFG National Title. Is that correct?
Correct.
Did I get it right?
Yep.
We were just talking before we started here about wire fraud,
Yeah.
which is sounds like it's a big deal in
Yeah.
escrow, which I never
Yeah.
even thought that would be.
Yep.
And we're talking about Nigerian princes.
Yep.
And my story is 2 years ago, I got a call, and I know everyone's going to be like, oh, you're an idiot for falling for this. And I didn't fall for it all the way, but I got a call from the IRS.
Yeah.
Everyone's heard this scheme.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they said,
Pay us in Target
Pay
gift
us-
cards.
yeah, pay us, you owe $4,000 or whatever, which I didn't, and the sheriff's on his way to your office now if you
Yeah.
don't pay me, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And so the first person I called was my dad, because my dad knows everything. He works for Homeland Security, and he's like, "You're being scammed." And I Googled it, and then he hung up the phone as soon as I Googled his license number or whatever. So you had a question for me.
Well, no, I was just going to ask the question in the context of what we're doing here. What was kind of the inspiration for starting the podcast?
It was something that I wanted to do for a couple years. And are you familiar with Todd Duncan?
Yeah.
So we go to his sales mastery, and from there it kind of got Ryan and I motivated. And for a long time we would just roll our eyes, or I can't speak for Ryan, but I would roll my eyes when it came to motivational, personal business development. So I finally got talked into going 1 year and loved it, and kind of fell off the wagon, started reading books and really implementing a lot of the things I was learning, and kind of enjoyed speaking about it in front of my colleagues. And so 2 years ago at Sales Mastery, I said, Ryan, I think I want to start a podcast where we just interview cool people with success stories in one form or another. And so I talked about it for 18 months, had notes and everything, and but never acted on it. And one day I was doing a presentation in front of my coworkers about call reluctance, and I broke call reluctance down into 3 categories: cold call, and then bad news calls, and then inaction. And I think a lot of call reluctance I struggle with, I think everyone does, is you get a great idea, either in your personal life or your business life, and you think about it, you fall asleep thinking about it, and then you wake up the next day and you never act on it. And that could be out of fear of failure, fear of embarrassment, fear of rejection. And so I was giving this presentation, and Ryan goes, just like your podcast.
I called him out.
In front of like 25 really successful people. And so I said, fine, jackass, I'll do it. Let's do it. So I put it on the calendar for a couple weeks from that date and scrambled, bought all the equipment. And then, do you know Doug Mendenhall?
Yeah.
He was our first guest.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so from there, we really get a lot out of it. So selfishly, we kind of do this for us, so we get to meet and talk with cool people. And then just from our own show, we've taken away a lot that we've implemented. So there you go.
Probably works both ways, hey?
Yeah.
You guys get to be here for everyone.
Well, and how many times are you walking around in your day-to-day activities at a restaurant or at the grocery store or at the gym, and you don't take the time to get to know everyone around you, because that would be impossible. But what we've learned is just through our sphere of influence, we know so many cool stories, so many cool people that we would have never known about if we wouldn't be doing this show. So even outside of the show, when I'm at a dinner party or something, I'll take the time to have this kind of conversation with people that I probably didn't before the podcast.
Yeah.
And it's funny how much you learn about people and how deeper those relationships go at a quicker pace. So.
Yeah, and everybody likes to talk about themselves, right?
Right.
So, I mean, if you really like to talk about yourself, this is like the ultimate venue for that.
It is.
You have a golden microphone, and I mean, you just get to sit here and talk about yourself.
The golden microphones, the story behind that is we were sitting in his office, and he was trying to talk me into it. Come on, we'll be better as a team.
He's
and
like,
I was
"There's no way.
I'm
There's no way I'm gonna be
I'm
on it."
like, dude, we have like big work goals, like this is going to get in our way. And then, like, out of joking, I was like, all right, you get me a gold microphone and I'm in. And then, like, 2 days later, Amazon 2-day shipping. He's like, here's your golden mic, man.
That's awesome.
Are you picking him? Is he close enough to the mic? You pick him up?
Yeah, maybe just scoot over a little bit, or bring the microphone over a little bit.
Like that?
Yeah, that's beautiful.
All right.
So, the reason I picked you out to be on the show, or
I was wondering about that. Yeah.
is one thing that Ryan and I think kind of our office is working on is the extra value we think we're offering our clients really value anymore, and because it hasn't changed a lot in the last few years. We do all the basic expectations, but on top of that, we think we're providing lots of value, especially when it comes to technology.
Yeah.
And one thing that through watching different podcasts and stuff, we're starting to question is what we think perceived as value by our customers. And I don't know you very well, but I know you loosely through our industry.
Yeah.
And one thing that I've always thought you've done really well, both at Stewart Title, your previous company, and at WFG, is you do offer value far above and beyond your services to your referral partners. And that's one of the reasons I've always done business with you guys. So what are your thoughts on value and adding value beyond your services?
Well, I mean, I think that's a really big industry question, right? I mean, I think for all of us, and actually was a big reason I chose to move to WFG, was I felt it was a place we could offer value. You, me, all of us work in a really highly regulated industry. So the opportunity to differentiate is kind of what we're looking for. And value is, I suppose, always in the eye of the receiver. I mean, we close a loan, you originate a loan, the box is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, that we can run around in. And so you're looking for those other things that will differentiate the way you do business. So value is subjective, we'll say that right off the bat, but I think one of the things that we have done really, really well, and one of the things that really drew me to the company I'm at now, and I certainly don't mean to turn this into a commercial for WFG, but if I can, I will.
We're looking for sponsors. So.
But, you talk about extraordinary people and the opportunity to be surrounded by extraordinary people. We have some really extraordinary people. Justin Tucker, our Chief Marketing Officer, was just named one of Inman's rising stars in the industry. Our Chief Technology Officer was just named Innovator of the Year at the Inman Conference in San Francisco. So really forward-thinking types of people that are asking the same question. What's value as, what we do is in that smaller and smaller box. So for us, I think there's two things, but we're really, I think, a process over product in industry. We should be, and we are certainly a process over product company. So how do we fit into your process, whatever that process might be? And, differentiation, I think, in our business doesn't take a whole lot anymore, because 1 or 2 or 3 degrees of differentiation makes a big deal in a transaction that's otherwise pretty homogeneous, no matter where you go due to regulation or whatever. So I think it's about, looking at our customer's process. We're an intermediary, so, we're not dealing with the end consumer except for how they perceive the experience to be. So really the question is, kind of goes back to you, and it would be different for everybody. What's the value to you, and how do you perceive one experience as different from another experience? And then, and I'd love to know your thoughts on that, but I think then and I'll tell you what I think the real difficult thing is it's really nuanced in our business and comes down to people and what you can motivate people to do and what you can motivate them to want to do. And that is a huge thing for me right now, is motivation. What motivates people and how do we get to it? Because that really, at least on my side of the business, is value. other thing, and Justin, our CMO, talks about this a lot, is in our business for consumers, they really aren't shopping us against other title companies, right? I mean, they don't even know what we are. And so they're actually, the new consumer is comparing their experience to other consumer experiences they have, not to another title company, because they don't have the opportunity to do that. So we're being compared to, Uber or Domino's. You can track your pizza, and I think they still wonder why our process is so complicated. And if we can make it less so, then I think maybe that's value.
Well, and it's funny you brought up the Domino's, because I've heard that from different people that say, congratulations, you have this fancy online app. I can also track my pizza, $15 pizza, with an app, and I know exactly when it's going to get to my house.
Yeah.
So what else you got? Right?
Yeah.
Because that's kind of where 3 or 4 years ago, even last year, that was still, if you had some good technology pieces, you could stand out from your competition.
Not now.
We're not now. That's
Yep.
pretty leveled.
Yep.
And I think that some people are going to get left behind over the next couple of years because they still think that's value,
Yep.
but the consumer is not perceiving it. Specifically for referral partners, and there's a lot of industries that require on referral partners, right? And
Yep.
having good relationships.
Yep.
And one thing that specifically you've done that has helped me in my business, and I've tried to replicate, is the education piece, right? Because if everyone's on the same playing field and kind of has the same limitations as far as technology, and you're meeting those expectations, giving information to the people that send you business or you do business with to make them smarter out in the field has been huge. I've used statistics that you've spoke about in your market meeting, what do you call market analysis, market updates on the local housing market here. I use those almost every day. And so it's motivated me to give, when I'm talking with people I do business with, it's not so much about what I can do for their clients, but it's about giving them good information that they can repeat to people.
Yeah. Yeah, I think asymmetric information is a big differentiator.
What do you mean by asymmetric information?
I mean, we should have more information than the consumer, for one, which is difficult to do anymore, right? Because there's so much information out there. Yeah, you just Google it. So
They think they know the right information, though. That's hard.
well, but if you don't have better information, sometimes it can be hard to have a discussion with a consumer about the information that they're presenting. I mean, probably a really easy case in point is I can go online right now and the internet will tell me I can get a 3.25% mortgage for 30 years. And that's not true, but that's what it'll tell me. And so, or for instance, I mean, in our market, the general consensus is, I mean, if you know today that our market's great, you're congratulations, you're just like every Joe Schmuckatelli out there, so we all know the market's great. The question is, do you know why? Do you know where? Do you know what product type? Do you know if you need to bring product to the market, where to get it? There are zip codes in the metro area right now that are actually buyers markets. I mean, specific down to the zip code, which, by the way, I think is what's coming in our market next.
Well, and to speak on that, I think I got it from one of your presentations where you talked about for the first time, and I could be wrong, but for the first time in our market, we're seeing a duality where it's a seller's market and a buyer's market at the same time, depending on the price point.
Well, depending on the price point, the zip code, and the product type. I mean, there are markets where velocity is substantially different than it is in other markets, and I think this market specifically, the metro area specifically, is going to become really hyper-localized. And I actually think there will be certain zip codes that become difficult to move product in, as that's just my opinion. So, really knowing that information, I started developing that presentation. So when I got into leadership at Stewart, I think it was like 2006. They said, get in leadership, it'll be great. get into leadership. The market's good.
And before that, you were an escrow officer?
Yeah. So I managed a branch and closed. And I said, okay, I'll do that. And then the wheels fell off the wagon. And we had, in the market that I managed for Stewart before, we had 18 offices. And by the time we were done, we had 6 in the same area. And I had sat in front of about 40% of the people that I worked with and had really, really difficult conversations with them. And on the flip side, and we all should have known, right? On the flip side, I said, I don't ever want to not see some indicators moving our way. And so we developed this, kind of 4-part analysis to say, and you can go a lot deeper than those things, but where's the market going? I didn't want to get caught with my pants down. I wanted to know, and then we found that information was really valuable to our partners as well.
So to slow you down a little bit, because this isn't a mortgage show, so a lot of people are listening. We might be going over their head a little bit.
All right.
So let's back up just a hair.
Yeah.
And what is a title and escrow company, and what is an escrow officer in a very short, if you could just summarize that for people that don't know.
Super short. So our industry is broken into two parts. One is settlement services and one is the insurance side. So the settlement services side is just an intermediary. It's a third neutral place for the bank to put their money and the seller to deposit their deed, or in this case, the bank to put their money and the borrower to deposit a security agreement, and then we take care of all the middle stuff,
so
all the payoffs.
Independent, third party, neutral, that handles all the funds.
Sure. If Ryan's a seller and I'm a buyer and I don't know Ryan, he's not going to give me a deed until I've given him money, and I'm not giving him money until he gives me a deed. So we have this third place that says, okay,
the meeting in the middle.
Yeah, we'll give it all to you and we'll tell you what to do, and then you'll do it, and we'll make sure Ryan's old mortgage is paid off, and so that's the settlement services part. And then there's the insurance piece, which is, at our heart, we're an insurance company, or most of us are, and we'll write you a policy of insurance that says, for the buyer, you have title of the property and you can sell it. For the lender, you have the right to foreclose, essentially, in first lien position. So those are 2 parts. Different parts of the country, those things are separated out. Here, they tend to be the same thing. So. And
when you said you went to Stewart, built up your branches, and then the wheels came off, you were referring to the mortgage collapse, correct?
Yeah.
One thing that we're starting to see now is the positive things about that mortgage collapse and the recession in general.
Yep.
I think that out of the recession, we're seeing in our industry, but all over, people that lost everything, had to start over, are coming back stronger.
Yep.
And I think that is kind of related, in my opinion, to a lot of these cool startups we're seeing, like Uber, and even smaller ones. But in our industry, too, I love what you said, where we kind of have to rethink coming out of that collapse. What are we offering? Is that kind of where you're going?
Yeah, and I think it was kind of back to the conversation about information and symmetry or asymmetric information. And I guess the comment was, if information's symmetric and everybody knows what you know, you're not really valuable. So because you were talking about, what do we bring to the table? How do we differentiate? Where's the value proposition? Again, the box being so small that you can kind of operate in from a regulatory standpoint. Even our pricing's regulated, right? Yeah. I mean, there's only so much you can do. It's difficult to even compete on price, and it's hard to differentiate. And I think you have to go to the people that then you're trying to serve and ask them what differentiation is. And it's hard about it in our business. Sometimes you ask and they're like, well, we don't know. We were expecting you to figure that out. I mean, it's a difficult question. So I don't know. I think it also has to do, sometimes that has to come in the market you're in. I mean, sometimes your organization is not what's going to differentiate you. It will provide a platform maybe for you to do that, and some are better at allowing people to differentiate their brand than others. But in our business, you look at a lot of individuals have gone to branding themselves, and there's a lot that goes into that, social media and all the way through to how you communicate in your transaction. And they've gone away from company branding and really into kind of individual branding. We see a lot of that from our customers. And I think it's because it's easier to differentiate on that level.
Do you think that also helps people differentiate from the big internet companies? You think that's because it's kind of like it's going two separate directions?
Yes.
Because you have your Quicken and your Lending Tree, and
yes.
And then you see people saying, okay, I'm going to brand myself away from my company.
Yeah.
So it's almost like going the opposite direction.
Well, I think it goes back to motivation, and I think I just am fascinated with motivation. So everyone is consuming our product, real estate, or a mortgage for a reason. They're motivated. Something is motivating them.
They have a motive.
Right. And I think the value comes from, kind of discerning what that motive is. Sometimes they'll tell you up front, sometimes they won't. And then meeting that motive. Some people, so this is a really kind of corny story, but I guess it would be as simple as when I used to close, sitting down with somebody. Some people you could tell right off the bat you needed to spend 2 hours with. They had a need to go through this process with you, and other people didn't. They actually didn't want to talk to you or even make eye contact. They wanted to sign as quick as they could and get out of your office. So what's value to those two people? It's not in your pricing, it's not in your brand, it's not in anything else. It's you gave me what I wanted. In that case, or in that sense, I think it becomes really, really difficult to broad brush paint value in our industry because everybody wants something different. How do you provide value to somebody who's refinancing their house because they're getting a divorce and have to give 50% of their equity away? It's not the same way you provide value to somebody that is buying their first house and is just gorked out of their mind excited and they really want to enjoy this process. I once told a lady and I tell this story a lot to anybody who will listen because it was like a really weird story. I told a lady once in a transaction that her husband had a child she didn't know about as part of the transaction.
Hey-o.
So now that's an awful situation, but in her case, value was certainly different based on how we acted and what we provided her. She was still going to have an experience, and how we provided value was certainly different than we'd provide it to somebody else.
So at the closing table,
yeah,
you had to let her know that her husband had a kid that she did not know about.
Yeah, so it was a divorce situation, and I'm sure you guys have been in those situations where they're like, we need to schedule the signing at least 45 minutes apart. They don't want to even sniff each other's perfume in the hallway as they walk past each other, or we could have a reaction. And I was really new at closing, and we sat down, and there was a child support lien on the HUD statement. There used to be HUD statements back then. I don't even know what a CD is anymore, so I probably couldn't even explain one. And I know this isn't supposed to be an industry show, but real estate's about people, which is why I like it so much. And all the other stuff is just kind of, comes with the side. Anyways, we sit down, and she says, why is there a child support lien on here? And it was like $1,800 or something. I said, well, I don't know. I mean, you have a child? And she's like, yeah. And I said, well, it's, the efficiency of the state. This is one thing they do right. And
they got this one through
they got this one through really quick. She's like, our divorce isn't even final. I was like, wow, this is impressive. Chalk one up to DSHS.
How about them Blazers?
Yeah. And she said, no, I don't know. It's just weird. And I think I said something along the lines of, I don't know, unless that son of a bitch got another child. I mean, I guess we can look. And I pulled out the child support order, and wrong sex, wrong age, wrong social security number, right father. And I felt really, really bad. And I felt bad. Poor lady, all the color drained out of her face. And she said, I need to excuse myself for a minute. And she got up and walked out and came back in and just, signed real quick. And separate note, I also signed somebody once that I swear to you was Bruce Willis. And he would not admit it to me. And I kept telling him, "You are Bruce Willis." And he said, "No, I'm not." And I said, "What?"
Did you notarize his documents?
Yeah, but I think, well, it didn't say Bruce Willis, but I still think he was lying to me. I mean, he looked just like Bruce Willis. I mean, I wanted to take a picture with the guy. But the point there was going back to value is it's really hard in our business because I think it means something different to everybody. And because we're commoditized and we're pretty regulated in a lot of ways, I think one of the difficulties in being in our business is that you have to be able to perceive the motivation of and provide value on an individual basis.
I think you bring up a great point, and that is a big skill set, knowing knowing who you're talking to and be able to mirror them and figure out what their perceived value is going to be. And I think that skill set kind of got pushed on the low priority list over the last 10 years, and it's coming back. And as we're trying to figure out what's going to be our perceived value more than what we're doing now, and we looked at information and everything. One statistic, and this might have been from you, it might have been from a Todd Duncan thing, but for the first time in the country's history, just in the workplace, we have 5 different generations working with each other at the same time.
Yeah.
And so you got to look at your consumers the same way. You have 5 different generations of people that you're doing business with. So being able to improve your skill set to be able to find out what the value is, because the value of a millennial is going to be different than a baby boomer, different than a Gen Xer, different than somebody going into retirement, senior citizens.
And we can't really afford to segregate ourselves necessarily, not as organizations, perhaps as individuals or teams we could, but we can't really afford to segregate ourselves to one of those 5 generations.
Yeah, like we're just going to cater to the millennials.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And you see people making that mistake.
Yes.
Where they're 500,000 millennials are moving to the Portland, Southwest Washington. It will be buying homes over the next 5 years.
Right.
So does that mean I restructure my whole business to cater them? Because then I'm leaving out the other 5 people. So
Well, except for the product type may very well come from a completely different generation. I mean, the product might come from boomers who are downsizing. So how do you match up those expectations? Even communication is completely different. You know, a lot of our end consumers don't want to email or talk to us. They want to text us about their transaction.
yeah.
And pretty soon they're probably going to want to Snapchat us about it. And we don't get to tell them how they want to be communicated with. So if that's what they want, we'd better figure out a way to do it. And the challenge on our side, as is yours, how do you make it compliant? How do you make it secure? How do you do all of these things? And I think largely make it transparent to them so that they have a good experience. And a lot of times I think people aren't going to know they've had a good experience, unfortunately for us, until they go somewhere and have a bad one.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say it's so much about customer service, and when somebody says, you know, Ryan, why should I use you versus, you know, Quicken or whoever.
Yep.
And it's one of those hard ones where it's like you're not going to know how good my team and I are at helping you until you have a bad experience somewhere else. And what's that worth to you?
Well, yeah, it's that statistic where 1 out of 10 people that have a great experience will leave a 5-star review.
Right.
7 out of 10, if they have a bad experience, will leave a review.
Right.
Leave a poor review.
Right. And I think we don't have to, I think we oftentimes externalize the idea of differentiation in customer service, and I think we should do the opposite. I think we should internalize it and ask ourselves the question, in the industries that I interact with, what is good customer service to me? And one of the reasons I love Domino's, and I think everybody does, is they have this culture of self-deprecation. You know, our crust is like cardboard and our sauce stinks, and now, you know, and we're going to change it. And now they have this commercial where, you know, our stores are ugly, you know, so we're tearing them down. They meant a lot to us, but we're tearing them down, you know.
And they showed the franchise owners in that.
And they show them tearing it down, and they say, we love what we do, we don't like where we do it. that's cool. You know, where, you know, they're kind of calling themselves out. I think for us, we have our own motivation. You know, there are certain places I really love doing business with, and other places that I don't. And I think if we think about why that is.
As a consumer?
Yeah, as a consumer. And, you know, we can do our own little, you know, internal market research, I guess, in our own mind and ask ourselves the question. And then the hard part in our business is, you know, Ryan, you were talking about, you know, there just might be those people that have to go use somewhere else. And there is, I think, that alignment of value propositions where they see it and you deliver it. But the hard part in our business is sometimes there's people that maybe we don't know what their motivation is, or we can't meet it and we have to not do business with them, right? That's hard because, but I think it's, and the same is true, I think, for employees. I mean, either we have, you know, for us, we have a value proposition for them or we don't. Either we understand their motivation or we don't. And some of the worst employment experiences have been trying to hold on to people whose motivation isn't the same as the organization's, and you know, not being willing to kind of say, hey, you know what? Not in a bad way, but we kind of don't want the same thing. It seems like maybe you should find another place where you do want the same thing. That's really hard to do, especially if there's revenue attached.
Absolutely.
That's difficult.
Well, and to go back to the point you made right before that, where if you have to be proactive in your value add, you can't be reactive, right? And if you do have that client that you just can't make happy, you can't be so reactive that you go back and change your value add. You have to have confidence in what you're offering,
right?
Because nobody has 5 out of 5 stars. You look at what's that mattress company that comes in the box?
Oh, Casper.
Casper.
Yeah. The
4.8 stars.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, why not 5 stars?
Yeah.
You're never going to get that 5 stars because it just there's people
I know
out there.
It's enraging trying to buy a car.
And so
looking for one with 5 stars. They don't exist.
So I mean, if you have 4.8 and then you get a bad review, is Casper going to go back and change their marketing strategy? So
no, but there's a lot of danger, I think, in, you know, and it's probably a new frontier. Anybody can go online and say anything they want. Yeah. That's difficult too, and you know, a lot of times.
And they know it,
and they know it. You bet they will. Yeah. You bet. So always, you know, whatever their motivation is, I think trying to hold on to them does a little more harm than it does good, though. Honestly.
Definitely, you got to know when enough is enough. But it's hard.
Do you guys watch South Park?
Not since college.
Yeah,
there was one on the other night I watched.
We digress.
And who's Kyle's dad? Not Stan, the other one.
I do watch Family Guy sometimes. I'm ashamed to admit.
Family Guy's great too. But the attorney walks into a restaurant with Stan, and they're like, "Oh, it'll be an hour and a half wait," and he goes up and whispers in his ear, the what do they call him, the host ear, and he goes, oh, right away, right over here, we have a special table set up for you. And then the food came out, and he whispered in his ear again, and Stan's like, what's going on? How come we're getting all this great service? He's like, well, I'm a Yelp reviewer. And then so everyone catches on, and pretty soon everyone's a Yelp reviewer, and all these restaurants are like, we can't give free food out all the time. We give high priority.
Okay, but this goes back
and then they threaten their Yelp review during the cartoon.
Yeah, but this goes back to your earlier discussion about changing your own value proposition midstream, which doesn't really work. You can't. I think you got to know what you are. I mean, being self-aware is hugely important. Know what you are, know where your value proposition is, and honestly, I think you're a happier person if you get there, and you can be okay with maybe you don't have a value proposition to every single person you meet. Their motivation may not be where yours is, and you don't have that kind of alignment of needs, and so it just doesn't work.
Well, and that's why there's multiple different title companies. That's why there's lots of loan officers.
Absolutely.
Like there's a right fit for everybody.
And anymore, you go back to what do people want? It's hard because they want really great service, but they also want great price, but they want you to make something really complex very simple. And we all want that as consumers. If you think about the technology that's probably behind tracking a Domino's pizza, or Uber and what they create, or there's some even your bank. Think about what your bank does and then presents to you on the front end that is incredibly regulated and complex, and you don't care.
Yeah.
Now we want to be able to make deposits on our phone and transfer money with it's this increasing.
And you see their marketing start to change, because for the last 5 years it was a lot about that, right?
Yep.
And now that's kind of the standard.
Right. Right now, even your local bank does that. That technology is kind of percolated. And so the real huge question is, because you said this earlier, great, you have an app, great, you can, for us, you can competently close a loan. You have licensed people. Well, so everybody does. So, what do you have over and above that? And it is really, really difficult to stay ahead of that, because the question is, what's next? What do people want next?
So how often are you individually and as a company looking at your value propositions and what you're adding, and how often are you guys changing? Is it a cyclical?
This is going to sound
thing?
really cliche to you, but every single day, honestly. Sometimes it's transaction by transaction. And the other piece that's hugely important then is feedback. You have to pick up the phone and call people and ask them. The best opportunities are the ones where they hate you. Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's where you're going to get the most feedback. Pick up the phone, call them up, ask the question.
And so many people fail there, right? It's when you have bad news to deliver, or a phone call that's going to be painful.
Yeah.
It's so easy to procrastinate that call.
Yep.
And go, I'll do it tomorrow or whatever. But you're absolutely right. Those are the calls that need to be done quickly.
And what is the consumer going to want in 5 years? I remember when I was in real estate at the beginning of my career, and I wasn't particularly good at it, so I got out. But I remember we had the old MLS books, and it was where all the properties were listed, and they'd turn your thumbs black, and you'd thumb through them, and it was just the hottest, newest. When that book came out, that was all the listings, and the print was like this small. And I remember when they put the MLS online, and everybody said, "Oh, that's the end. It's the end is here. Real estate's dead, and it's all over."
Like people won't need agents anymore. Is that
right?
Yeah.
Right. And if you think about the advent of the online mortgage and the automation and there's all these threats coming from everywhere. And the reality is, a real estate transaction today is more complex and more regulated than it's ever been at any point in time, I think. And then you get into a really competitive market, and that goes back to the conversation of now you need data. You need good information. But real estate just changed and pretty dramatically. And I'll be honest with you, all the noise around apps and communication, and I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm a little sick of it. And it's almost overload at this point. And I think, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but I think that stuff's already dead.
Do you think that maybe we're putting, by offering all this technology and ease of use, we're putting more burden on the borrower? Because I feel like that sometimes as a consumer is great. I have another app I need to download, or I have
Right.
another online thing I need to do, or I'm already on Instagram, now I need this and now I need that, and I got to follow you here, and if I want to enter this contest, I got to join this list and like this person. And there is something refreshing about going into a store to buy something and talking about somebody that knows what they're doing.
I think people want information. That's never going to change. I think the question is, how are we going to deliver it to them in a way that meets their needs. And it might be a more simplistic form of delivering the information, not such a complex one. And if you look, I think, at the way people are consuming information, like I was saying earlier, our buyers and sellers want to text us.
Yeah.
Maybe the speed of communication is what's going to matter. You know, maybe it's not that I've presented it in this really fancy, flashy way. You know, I don't know. I'm thinking of myself as a consumer and what I want. What I want anymore is immediate information as quickly as I can get it. And I'm not overly concerned with the form it comes in. I want information pushed. I don't want to have to go pull it. How do we provide that in a highly regulated, compliant environment? You know, but it goes back to motivation. What do people want? Value is different for everybody. So, and then how do you replicate it? And oddly enough, for us anyways, people become more and more and more and more important to that process. They have to give a damn, right? That's what I say.
Yep.
You can tell. You get on the phone with somebody and you can tell if they just don't care.
Yeah.
And they're there and they're going through the process and they'll give you good service, but they don't want to. And how do you get people to care?
And it's obvious from company to company. And I was getting our coffee this morning. And you guys go to Black Rock? You ever
Yeah.
go to Black Rock?
Yeah.
Have you ever had somebody not friendly there?
No,
Seems like
I don't
every
think so.
time I go there,
Nope.
they're always really friendly, not overly friendly, but
Yeah.
always really friendly. And then if I have to wait for a minute, they sit there and talk to me.
Yeah.
And they ask me questions.
Yep.
And it's not, are you having a good day? Because that's a BS question.
Right.
It's, did you watch a solar eclipse last night? Or yesterday morning?
Right.
Where did you watch it? What did you think? Did you
Right.
think it was... And so I found myself sitting here half awake at 6 o'clock in the morning at Black Rock this morning, having a conversation, and I felt good leaving. And that's a company culture, right? And so I'm going to reach out to whoever owns Black Rock and see if they want to come on and talk about that. But
That'd be
it's
cool.
that culture is hard to
Yep.
create, but it's even harder to maintain. And it's, yeah, I mean, how do you...
I think, yeah, it is hard to maintain. You have to have a willingness to draw a line and say this is what we expect and this is what we want and this is the experience we want our consumer to have, and then hold to that. I think you really, really as a company have to care about that. Any company has to care about that. And that's difficult. It's difficult to keep people engaged over long periods of time. Drives back to the question of motivation. Everybody's motivated by something. And, you know, this new, have you ever read Dan Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow?
I think I read the summary.
Okay. So, story about that book. I was in the San Francisco airport once looking for a book to read in one of the Hudsons or whatever it was, and I was looking at Fast and Slow, and I was like, this looks a little like, I don't know, this is a little heavy for me. And Bob Schieffer came up of ABC News and said, that's a great book, and you should read it.
While you were in the
And
bookstore?
While I was in the bookstore, there was Bob Schieffer, and I was like, Bob Schieffer, and then he walked away. It was, you know, it was kind of like he came in a cloud and told me to read the book.
Oh, he was
and
in the store.
He was
not
in the
like on
store.
TV.
No, he was in the store.
Oh.
Yeah. And then he wandered around, and I kind of followed him to make sure it was Bob Schieffer, and he didn't deny it like Bruce Willis did, but I think he's pretty sure. Anyways, the point is, it's like kind of economic social sciences, which is, you know, driving into why people make decisions and kind of going away from sort of the rational actor, you know, where we can predict how they make decisions because they're rational, and actually people aren't rational. And it goes back to, you know, individual motivation, and at the base, you know, yes, there's some basic motivations we all have, but kind of going into it, you know, economic social science of why people make decisions. And when they have options, service is getting better and better and better and better. And so you asked the question, and it was kind of cliche, every day. I think our WFG, one of the things they do really, really well is ask themselves all the time, is our baby ugly? And
Yeah.
And is this thing that we really love and have put a lot of time in just a big turd? I mean, does anybody use it? And we're kind of really focused on measuring it, because if no one's using what we've put out, it's not valuable, and we have to stop.
That's hard to do if you've put a lot of time and energy into a system that is not getting traction, right? To abandon that.
Yep. But we've missed something then, because those things that work they're not hard. They get traction. Once you kind of hit it, it works. Look at, all the social media things, Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook. Look how they get traction and they're used for whatever. It's meeting a need that people have. For us, and I think one of the great skill sets of any organization is knowing when to stop something, not knowing when to start it. It's when do we stop doing this thing that nobody but us cares about? And our industry is really good at doing things that nobody else cares about and telling you that they're awesome.
Yeah.
We have this thing and you should love it, and it's kind of hard to interact with, but man, once you get it down, it'll tell you stuff that you could pick up the phone and ask us. And maybe they want to pick up the phone. I don't know. But our company is really good at kind of making fun of ourselves and asking ourselves the question, are we really bringing value? And we kind of have a culture of actually asking ourselves that, hey, actually, is that actually valuable? Because I don't think anybody cares. And the consumer will tell you, go out and ask them.
Well, you kind of have to be all things to all people right now. And everybody's a salesman. We're always selling, right? Everyone from the receptionist in your office all the way up. And I think that just talking with you, that's becoming more relevant or more obvious to me, is that you have to be all things to everybody. And you have to have not just one skill set anymore. You have to be able to talk to multiple people, identify what's important to them, and then have the resources to provide that, even if it's just meeting the expectation.
Well, and I think that goes back to, so now we're talking about motivation, right? So maybe your front desk person to your executives, it goes back to giving a damn. And you have to be able to connect why, I think this is true, why those people should care. Why should you be pleasant? Why should you be on time? Why do these things matter? And how do I connect what you do to the overall? Speaking about, now sort of in an employment sense, how do you impact the total? I think people want to matter ultimately. So how do you connect what they do? How is their work worthwhile? I was reading a thing yesterday that said happiness in the workplace peaks at 35 years old, and then goes down, at a pretty rapid rate after that. Peak unhappiness, I think, was 55. And it talked a lot about the different motivations at those times and how organizations are bad at, they're really good at motivating people at the beginning of their careers and not so good at keeping them engaged and motivated over time. And that's hard. It's hard work.
Let me ask you another question. You talked about having the employees where you just can't get that positivity or that happiness with them, and it's they're not going to get it in the job, and you're going to have help them find a way out. Have you had hard nuts to crack to find that motivation that maybe aren't positive, aren't happy, but they do really good work and you want to keep them? Have you had one of those nuts that's hard to crack, and then you finally broken through and were able to find that motivation and get what you want out of them?
Yes.
Can you talk about that for me?
Yes. Every time, almost without fail, I will tell you it comes from that individual being lied to about their performance over a long period of time. They've had managers that were unwilling or unable to praise them for what they did well and help them grow in areas where they didn't do well. And almost without fail, you sit down and you talk about maybe these other areas where they need improvement, and they're shocked. And they say, but I've always been told I was doing really, really well. And I think that's, you have to do it up front quickly if you meet somebody new or they come into your sphere of influence. But I think it's about being honest with people. And I say a lot in my business to the people I work with, if we're not having occasional difficult conversations, we're not actually communicating. There's no real communication going on. And by the way, that goes both ways. They ought to be able to say, hey, I really didn't appreciate the way you handled this or the way you handled that. There's a lot of easy ways out in a management or leadership role where you avoid a situation. But I think almost without fail, it comes because an organization or an individual has been dishonest with somebody, and they never sat down and said, I actually care about your success. I care whether you can do well here, and I have some feedback for you, and here it is, and I think you can do better. And by the way, you matter here. How you act matters. You influence the environment. Nobody's a net neutral. Not in an organization, you're not. You're either contributing to the overall mission of the organization or you're detracting from it. But you don't kind of get to come in and sit and be kind of a net neutral. I don't care about anything or anybody. I just come in and do my job. It doesn't work that way anymore. And the smaller the organization, the more true that is. And then if you break it down to a team level, if you got 4 people on a team and one of them's just an unhappy, person, that disproportionately impacts the overall. So, and sometimes people don't they don't take it well, and they say, no, I disagree with you. And now, great, now you got a starting point to have a conversation. Good, we have disagreement, so let's talk about that. And maybe it's our expectation that's different than what you're willing to meet, but we still have to talk about it. Otherwise, it just kind of festers. And
it's not good for either party.
It's not good for either party. And here's what will happen. Eventually, they'll leave, and you'll be a jerk, and they'll go somewhere else, and they'll love the new place, and it's wonderful, and everything's great because Ryan's not there, and he was the problem, or whatever.
It's usually the case in our office.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But I think there's something about honesty, and then the invitation of honesty in return. We're not any more hierarchical organizations. People want to be able to have communication both ways, and they want to know, I think, that they can have an impact.
Well, and I love what you said,
overall.
That invitation for honesty on their part. You're not forcing them to do it. Here's your opportunity.
Yep. And
help us help you.
Yeah, give feedback. Tell us what we're doing wrong. Tell us what we could do better. I despise the culture of running around and telling everybody that they're doing awesome. And
just a bunch of fluff.
We should be saying, you're really awesome at this, but you're not so good at this. And
it's just communication, just like why a marriage would break down, you know?
Yep.
If you don't have those hard conversations and say, what are we missing here? What are we doing wrong? If you can't fix it, it's just going to be a little leak until it's a huge gushing problem.
How do you decipher if somebody goes, okay, you want feedback? This is everything you're doing wrong. How do you decipher what to implement and what not to? What's reasonable and what's not reasonable? How do you kind of decipher that?
Well, you just do whatever you want after they've given you the feedback. Is basically.
You're fired.
It's not the end process. It's not the end product that matters. It's the process. But no, I mean that's a tough one. I think sometimes you can also organizations have structure so that feedback can be given, I think, in a really constructive way. Sometimes maybe you invite them to go to the person that's your boss and give that feedback to them. Let your boss decipher what of that is real and what of it isn't, and then filter that information back down to you. Some of it, and I find this is true often, you already know. How many times have you gone and talked to somebody and they're like, yeah, I know. Yeah, I really wasn't probably given my best or whatever. Mm-hmm. Most of us already kind of know internally, to your point earlier about making cold calls or doing whatever. Nobody needs to tell you you're not doing it. sometimes what it takes is somebody calling you out and saying, yeah, like the podcast?
Yeah.
Yeah, I already knew I was avoiding that. It's rare, I find, that I get feedback that I don't already know and kind of have been beating myself up about, and it's rare that I give feedback to somebody and they're not like, yeah, I know. And what I lack is maybe a way to get better at that, or, whatever. So
one thing, so good job, by the way. That was really good for me to hear you talk about perceived value and all that. The other reason I wanted to have you on today is the only constants change. You were at Stewart Title for how many years?
Almost 19 years.
And I think a lot of people outside of our industry go through, either by choice or by forced, to make a transition that you did from Stewart to WFG. So I don't want to speak for you. So can you just talk about that a little bit, and maybe how other people can learn from your experience, good and bad?
Yeah. The first thing I would say, just right off the bat, is Stewart is a wonderful company, and I was so fortunate to spend almost 19 years there, and many, many wonderful people, and I was given a tremendous amount of opportunity and am grateful for the time I spent there. So this is more about when it was time for me to make the change than it is a conversation about an organization. So I have a lot of respect for the company and for many, many of the people there. So there was two really influential things I read. One of them was an article by Peter Drucker. It's called Managing Oneself. And it talks about, kind of in this day and age, spending time as an employee managing your own career and not thinking that someone else is going to do it. And
say that again.
The article or what it talks about.
No, what you just said.
Well, it's about managing your own career, not outsourcing that to someone else, not letting an organization or somewhere else manage it.
Gotcha.
And one of the concepts in there is, don't waste time going from bad to mediocre. Spend your energy going from mediocre to good or mediocre to great. Take what you're already kind of good at and improve those things to make them really, really good. Don't spend time on things that you're really miserable at doing naturally and try to get good at them. The amount of energy required to do both is approximately the same. The return is just significantly different. So kind of about managing yourself, actively managing your career and saying, what do I want to do and what am I naturally good at and what am I not? And maybe I should stop spending time focusing on the negative things about what I do. And then I read a book that actually we're going over now internally at WFG called Deep Change by, I think it's Dan Quinn. And it talks about the back cover of the book. It's Deep Change, and it says, don't let your organization kill you. And it's more about, kind of this idea that you talk about change being the only constant, yet we're all afraid of it and we don't like it. And I'll be honest, I was petrified of making a move. Really, really terrified. And I probably extended the time I stayed in an organization that I knew I wasn't providing value to. And when we talk about motivation, I knew we were going in different directions. That doesn't make their direction right and mine wrong, or mine right and theirs wrong. But I had a responsibility, I think, to make sure that I aligned with the values and the direction of the organization that I was a part of. And that's ultimately why I made that change. So Quinn's book talks about this idea that occasionally you need to go through deep change, not iterative change, but kind of this really deep change. The alternative is metaphorical slow death. And those are your, kind of your two options. And you see a lot of people that, get into a certain point in their career and they put it into neutral and they say, that's it. I'll coast into my slow death. And Quinn calls them, I think, the walking dead in the halls of corporations, where they're just kind of zombieing through the corporation. And the alternative is, kind of making this kind of journey where you go through change. So for me, it was about aligning myself with a place that I felt matched the skill set that I had that would help me go from good to great, not from poor to kind of decent at something. And I think it fits my skill set and the skill set of the people that I worked with a lot better. It's a young company. It's very introspective. They question everything they do. They are desperate for feedback. They're doing things very, very differently in a industry not known for differentiation, and that piece is exciting. But I was probably 2 years past my expiration date, honestly, and I probably should have been a little more proactive. I probably should have followed my own advice, and I maybe outsourced the management of my career a little more than I should have, rather than being really active and saying, how am I going to manage myself? What's my skill set? I think when you talk about that sort of complacent, unhappiness maybe in your career or whatever, as much as we all hate change, change is often the thing that kind of reinvigorates and re-energizes. Action is kind of the kryptonite for.
Yeah, it just gets the ball rolling.
Yeah, just I would always say, in our business, do something. What? Anything. Just do something. Other than what we're doing. Hey, we're not meeting our goals. We'll do something. What? I don't care. Anything. Just do something different.
Try something.
Yeah, try something. Well, what if it fails? Great. We'll know what not to do. That's hard to do. It's easy to say that. For me, it's been about actively managing my own career, not turning that over to somebody else, and feeling like I had an option and an alternative to do that.
And it sounds like you're putting in the time and energy into business and personal development outside of your career, reading books and doing things like that. Has that been a big part of not getting stagnant? Or
yes,
yeah.
Yes. And I think always all of us have our own built-in insecurities. And I think it was Freud or Jung, or I forget which one, that wouldn't even admit someone to therapy until they'd reached middle age, because he said they didn't really know themselves, and so there was no point in working on a half-baked person. So I have approached middle age, and I feel like I can be honest with myself about what I'm good at and what I'm not good at, and be okay with those things. You spend, I think, the first half of your life thinking you're hiding, and the second half of your life maybe realizing everybody already knows what you are and what you're good at, and you're the only idiot that's walking around thinking that you're fooling anybody. And, kind of getting to a place where you're just really brutally honest with yourself about, well, what am I good at? What's my value proposition? What do I need to improve on? And for me, getting over the insecurity of constantly placing myself with people that maybe I don't feel like I belong with, that really will challenge you. And I know both of you have experiences with connecting with people, and you wonder why would they want to help me, or why would they want to build into me? Why would
Totally.
Why do they want to do this? But then getting to the place where you say, I don't care. I'm going to take it, and accept that. But the big piece, I think, is not lying to yourself. Everybody already knows what you are. the faster you can come to grips with what you are, the better off you'll be, I think.
Did you ever feel an age barrier? Because the first time
Yes.
that you presented to me, I want to say it was about 2009, early 2010. And one of the first things I was like, this is a young guy.
Yeah, who is this
this
kid?
guy? This guy's smart. But I was, I was blown away at like the presentation you gave, and kind of my perception of this is a really young guy. Clearly, he's on top of it. Were you like, do I belong
Yes,
here?
all the time. So I've always, I'm in a pretty mature business, and I've always managed people older than me. And in large part, I was generally the youngest person in the room. Well, that was the chip on my shoulder to get over. I remember I once had somebody, and about the third day into hiring them, she finally looked at me and she said, I'm sorry, I just have to know, how old are you? And I said, old enough to be your boss. Let's move on.
Best answer ever.
So, I think you have to adjust some things. You got to know what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. For me, one of the weaknesses is I'm young, and not only am I young, I look young. And so, how do you overcome that? And I had to get over, well, you've been given the job, so just do the job. People want you to do the job. Nothing worse than a person who's constantly crying about whether they should be doing the job or shouldn't be doing the job. And it was hard for me. I did a lot of presenting before I got to a place where I had a comfort level with that. And it was one of the best things I ever learned. But I learned really quick not to get up and talk about something I didn't know anything about.
Yeah.
Because there's always somebody in the room that probably knows as much or more than you do about the subject, and nothing worse than that. Don't get up and talk about something you don't know about. But yeah, I've always felt like maybe I didn't have anything to offer, or maybe I should be quiet and not speak up, or perhaps I just needed a little more time. And I'm constantly amazed at, we talked about before we started here some of the really extraordinary people you've met through this process. I am constantly amazed at how many absolutely extraordinary people are floating around in our sphere of influence.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And their willingness to build into other people's lives, personally and professionally. And we have the opportunity in our business to meet some extraordinary people because of the business we're in. Real estate, the motivation of people, how they're using it, how they're leveraging it, how they're consuming it. And I feel really fortunate in that respect. So I've always struggled with my age in an industry where probably my peer set is 15 to 20 years older than me. And that was my problem, not theirs.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I had to get over that and say, look, either you're going to do the job or you're going to let this kind of nagging piece tell you that you can't do the job. And if there's one thing I've learned in this business, it's you, and this is so cliche, but you cannot judge a person whose story you don't know. Mm-hmm. Some of the most extraordinary people that I've met in this business would not put that off until you sat down and spent time with them and knew them. Real estate will teach you real quick. You can't judge who has money, who doesn't have money, what they do, what their education level is. You can't judge that. How many times have you looked at what somebody does and been like, I would not have guessed that?
Yeah.
My wife, when she used to work for a local credit union, when she was in Salmon Creek, she's like, you got these guys coming in, nice suit, flashy car, and then you pull up their bank account for them, and they got $42 in the bank, and then she's like, then I was out in Battleground, and you got old man farmer coming in some dirty overalls, and he's got a ton of cash in the bank, and so it's just that you can't judge a book by its cover.
I was the first guy.
And performance will overcome perception.
Yes.
Right? And My sister went through the same thing you're talking about. She went to Ivy League schools, graduated as a nurse practitioner, and went right in the field. And she had to deal with patients that had major issues.
Yep.
They were like, who are you? You look like you're still in school. And she overcame that so quickly with just her performance.
Yeah.
And now she's a highly recommended nurse practitioner, and she did that in a very short amount of time. And I was really impressed to see how they didn't shake her confidence at all, because she was so confident in her knowledge and her skill set.
Well, and if that barrier pushes you to overperform, great.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I always felt like, I remember up front, I thought, well, okay, I can't do anything except for I can outwork them. I can definitely do that. And, if it pushed you to do better, that's fine. And generally people are fairly, I think, open-minded, and they'll eventually give you the benefit of the doubt. But you also, I think, have to be aware enough to realize that perhaps you are very challenging to somebody who maybe isn't where they should be. Maybe you have a role to play, and as a younger person, that's really hard to get to the point where maybe you have a role to play in kicking somebody in the butt that's 10 years, 15 years your superior that can perform better. But if you can come at it with the right motivation, if you actually care about that individual and their success, and if you can find the motivation to do that, I think people respond to that generally. And if not, you've learned something. Maybe you shouldn't be working together.
Well, no, you're a cool dude. I'm glad you came on.
I'm glad I did too.
This has been really good. Are you on social media?
I am. Yep.
Twitter,
Instagram? I don't tweet and I don't Instagram. I'm on Facebook. That's about it. People keep telling me I need to be on Twitter and Instagram, and I'll be honest with you, it's been about 6 months that I've been on Facebook. So I was a resistor. So give me some time to get to tweeting.
How do we find you on Facebook?
You just look me up.
Okay.
It's just
Noah
Noah Blanton. Yep.
One thing I want to ask, because a lot of times we forget to directly ask this question, is this is called the hunt for success.
Yeah.
And everybody's definition of success is going to be different.
I was wondering if I get away without asking this question.
So,
is this the trick question?
No, but what is, and obviously your definition of success is going to change over time.
Sure.
But how do you kind of perceive success, and what do you? I mean, what's your definition of success?
I think my definition of success would be a little bit more probably introspective. I would say for me, at the point I am in my life right now, the definition of success is to know yourself, I think, and to get to a place where you're brutally honest with yourself, and where you and it might sound a little funny, but where you have a good rapport with yourself, a good relationship with yourself. That to me is successful, and the reason why is because it creates a genuineness and authenticity, I think, that is really desired in today's both social and business environment. I think people are looking for authenticity. I think we're looking for that for ourselves. So if you can do that, I think you can be successful in a lot of different areas of your life, professional, personal. So I think my definition would be really to know yourself, and then you would be successful. If you never did anything that anyone else would look at and categorize as successful, I still think you would be successful. I think there's a lot of people running around that don't really know themselves.
It's that it's a good day to die mentality, right? Where if I die today, I know that I have accomplished everything I want to accomplish, and I'm where I'm at in life, and everything is taken care of.
Yep. Yeah. And I don't...
It's not about how many dollar signs are on my paycheck.
Right. Yeah. But I think those things come...
from knowing yourself.
With the other. Yeah.
Well, you got to have a measurement, right?
Yeah.
And those dollar signs are some sort of measurement.
Yep.
for
Yes.
success.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So that to me, I think is how I define that.
I like it.
Well, thanks again. Open invite. Anytime you want to come and do this, let's do it.
Cool.
So
Cool. I've enjoyed it. Thank you, guys.
I'm out of town for a week, and then we'll be back in about 10 days, I would imagine, with another podcast. So thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks, Noah.